Welcome to the SPACE4Cities Webinar, number 2. My name is Alex Gluhak. I work for Open and Agile Smart Cities, which is an international network of cities working together to create local and globally interoperable data ecosystems. The webinar is part of the SPACE4Cities project, which is a pre-commercial procurement funded by the European Space Program. Which really looks at how space technologies can actually provide useful tools to solve different challenges that cities have. The webinar is really something that is a part of our sort of early market engagement, really looking at specifically around existing technologies already, trying to inspire different cities who have an interest in space technologies and in the opportunities they offer. And this webinar specifically is focused around climate resilience and climate adaptation. Basically, the idea is really to, first of all, show what's possible actually with existing capabilities such as, for instance, Galileo or Copernicus, how data or technologies like this can be leveraged for solutions that help solve challenges, and obviously get a first insights into this from the wider market. And we've got today really an interesting agenda, 3 talks from leaders in industry, organizations who already are sharing some case studies of what's possible today. And we hope that those presentations will inspire further your thinking. And we would obviously also like to engage you as part of the procurement exercise throughout the year, and to make sure that we also can capture your requirements going forward. And obviously then when we launch procurement next year, that we have hopefully solutions that also satisfy a broader need of cities around Europe. Okay, the talk today will really focus on one side around I guess showing different aspects of how space data and technologies can actually then help solve challenges emerging from climate change, such as, for instance, being able to understand what is your CO2 footprint in a city and how to best deal with it, how to deal, for instance, with coastal erosion and build up resilience, and also, for instance, how to better as well protect and also maintain important cultural heritage sites that could be also in danger from impact of climate change. And the talks will be really, I think exciting. We've got 3 presenters, Pete, Aurélie, and Georgia. You can see them here on the screen now. Obviously, I hope that the presentations will inspire some thoughts and ideas, and obviously also some interesting conversations later after the talks. Just so that you know, we have basically a few housekeeping rules because that's a large Zoom session. So we have over 200 registrations. If possible, please keep your mic and camera off for the time being. You have opportunities to ask questions later during the panel conversation. So by just raising your hand, but also you can also drop questions if you want during the talks as well into the sort of chat box. We will not answer questions straight away after the talks. As I said, there will be a panel conversation towards the end of the talks where we can discuss then what we heard about or learned about today. Okay, without sort of further ado, I would like then to hand over to our first presenter, which is Pete.
Thank you. So bear with me, I'll just share my screen. Hopefully that's coming through.
All good.
Wonderful. So my name is Pete Hampton. So I'm head of sales here at Everimpact. And what I'm going to take you through today is a little bit of an overview of what our objectives were with City of Dijon and cities in general, what our solution is. And I'm actually not going to take you through hundreds of slides. I'm actually just going to give you a live demonstration of the solution that we've implemented for Dijon and how it's helping them make strategic decisions for the city. So with all aspects around the measurement and action on solutions, we all know that what gets measured then can get managed, and carbon is no exception to that. And what we found is that normally when organizations track their number one KPI on their journey to net zero, the existing solutions that they're using really aren't up to the challenge. So our mission at Everimpact is really to accelerate this transition with accurate and real-time carbon measurement. And what we're doing is actually delivering a solution. This isn't just carbon accounting. This is actually live measurement of carbon. So historically, problems for the measurement of carbon have centered on existing carbon inventories and fuel consumption estimates. Typically, they're out of date. And the way that most organizations are calculating their emissions are by analyzing their activities and those of their supply chain and the use of lots of assumptions and models and emissions factors. That all goes into spreadsheets and other software. This is a good base, but the estimates tend to be both inaccurate and outdated. So the addition to that is these approaches also take a lot of time and generally cost a lot of money. And what we found, speaking to lots of cities around the world, is that these approaches mean that you can't accurately analyze the impacts of the decarbonisation measures as they happen. And if you don't have the data to prove your measures you're working on, you can't really unlock the opportunity for green financing and savings. And last but not least, these estimates are self-reported. So if you don't get them right, there's a reputational risk to the city if any mistakes are made. All of these limitations hinder the transition to a low carbon environment, which we're all striving for. So therefore, at Everimpact, we believe that direct physical measurement of emissions is crucial to the success of any projects that you might be implementing across your cities. So we've taken a technology utilizing satellite and sensor capability and implemented that in a number of scenarios. So one of them is cities and regions, which is obviously the focus of today, but also road transportation. So if you've got cities that are also responsible for road networks, main highways that may be going through their jurisdictions, we can also help manage that. If cities also have ports that they are responsible for, we can help with that. And the flip side of carbon emissions is carbon sequestration. So many cities around the world have got large forested or agricultural areas that within their jurisdiction. We can also help measure the carbon sequestration, which can then be converted into carbon credits and help generate revenue for the city if that's permissible under the regulations within your particular jurisdiction. So how do we actually go about doing that? Well, from a city and transportation solution, our key differentiator really is the combination of using satellite data and ground sensors, and then what is termed as retro pluming. So what we're able to do is using our algorithm in our back end is we can allocate the CO2 to its actual source. So we know how much CO2 has been emitted, where it's been emitted from, and who's emitted it. So whether that is road transportation, whether that is residential housing, whether that is industrial or commercial premises that are emitting that. So we can allocate that, we can allocate the actual source of those emissions down to the exact source that is emitting those emissions. So what does our solution look like? And this is what I'm going to drop out of these slides. You'll be pleased to know. I'm going to give you a short demonstration, but effectively what you're seeing on the right-hand side of the screen there is our dashboard. And that dashboard is a live view of a given environment, telling you exactly how much CO2 in a heat map type representation. And then we can allocate the actual source of those CO2 emissions. Now, the factors that we're taking into consideration here are data coming from ground sensors, the combination, and we're aggregating that sensor data with satellite data, so we can geographically allocate those emissions, but also weather data, so we can understand the pluming effect of CO2 as it moves across the city, so we can feed that back directly to its source. And then we have a large data processing and analysis back end that's doing all of the hard work in doing the calculations. We can then certify that as accurate from a reporting and communication standpoint. So the city can, with confidence, give that information through to third parties that are interested in understanding that information. And then the last area is we have access to green finance instruments, which allow the city to gain access to finance through different mechanisms that could potentially assist the city in implementing projects based on their stated ambitions around achieving net zero by a certain date, whatever that date is, and helping fund those projects, be that public transit or insulation of social housing or implementing a road tolling project or whatever it might be. So with that, I'm going to drop out of the slides and I am going to reshare a live demo, which hopefully will come through on your screens very shortly.
Yes, it's visible.
Wonderful. So bear with me 1 second. So hopefully you can still see this. So what you're looking at here is the solution that we have implemented for the city of Dijon. So for those not familiar, the city of Dijon is in the Burgundy area in the eastern side of France. They have a population of approximately 250,000 residents across the metropolitan area. And as you can see from this heat map, there is a significant concentration of CO2 as you get towards closer to the center of the city, the increase in CO2 as you can see on the heat map. There is a key on the right-hand side that you can see measured in tons of CO2 for that given area. What I can do now is I can actually slightly change the view so you can measure by district. So if you have a region within your city, there would likely be different district areas within your metropolitan area. And if I just hover my cursor over a particular district, I get an automatic pop-up that's telling me the name of the district, in this case, Courcelles-le-Mans. I can see the population that's in that particular district, the total amount of CO2 that has been emitted in the particular reporting period, and its allocated amount of CO2 that has been, or reported amount of CO2 that has been emitted by its source. So whether that's road transportation, industrial, commercial, residential, etc. If I take that layer off, I can, and I'm going to just do a fly out from the left-hand side, I start to get a breakdown of the details of how much CO2 has been emitted. Now, the reporting period so far is back as far as March 22 to February 23. I can see a total amount that has been emitted for the city over that period, so 1.98 million tons of CO2. I can break that down by month, and if I hover over those, I will get a number representing how much CO2 for that particular month for the whole city. And if I scroll down a little bit further, I see a pie chart that's broken down by those sources of CO2 for the city. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start to zoom in to the city. And you'll see as I zoom in, it is on the fly recalculating how much CO2 has been emitted for that particular area. Now, this may or may not be coming through on this zoom, but you'll see there's a layer of hexagons all over the map. Each hexagon represents 20 square meters. And what I can do is if I continue to zoom in, I can start to pick out a particular area. So let's look at this road intersection here between these two highways. Now, if I want to know how much CO2 has been emitted from this particular area, all I do, or any area on the map, I can just highlight the particular hexagons. And what you'll notice on the left-hand side is the numbers themselves are dynamically changing based on how many hexagons I'm highlighting. So within here, I can now see if I wanted to plot out this particular area, I can now see that for February in 23, the areas in green that I've just highlighted emitted 264 tons. In January, it was 202. In December, it was 304. And I can see also in the pie chart that it's road transportation. That's pretty obvious. It's a highway intersection. So the majority of that is going to be road transportation that's caused that. Now, why is this important? Because what this means is that as city planners, whether you're in planning, whether you're in transport management, whether you're in planning for housing or building construction across the city, or you want to implement a public transit network, or you want to implement a program of insulation, you want to help the city move away from the use of natural gas, whatever your projects are, you can do that by having access to accurate information about how your city is performing now. And then as you start to implement projects, how they are having a positive effect on the reduction of emissions across the city. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to clear the selection. And just in the last couple of minutes that I've got, I'm going to zoom out a little bit more so we can go back to see the whole city. I'm going to drag into here, into the center, and I'm going to re-zoom in back into the center of the city. And I can do exactly the same thing. I can start to highlight areas in here, and you'll see that the CO2 figures are changing again. Now, why is that important? Because I can start to see the breakdown in this particular district that I've chosen. You know, again, it's road transportation, but there's obviously industry or commercial. It might be shops, it might be restaurants, it might be a variety of commercial premises or light industrial in the city centre. And then there might be some residential in the city centre as well. So I can really start to allocate that based on its geographical location.
2 minutes.
Two more things. I'm sorry?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Yep, yeah, no problem. So I'm almost done actually. So just two more things to highlight. We have a reporting functionality, which based on my criteria, I can dynamically report, and that takes about 2 or 3 minutes to build a standard report, which you can then download from the platform and use and give to your key stakeholders. But what a lot of customers are doing, including Dijon, is we have the ability to extract the data, or the customer has the ability to extract the data via an API and then feed this emissions data directly into any business solutions that they may be using. So whether that's traffic management, whether that's business planning for the city, any other, an ERP solution, whatever it might be, we can take the data out dynamically from the platform directly into those business systems. So if somebody from the city is in charge of traffic management, we can take that data in for traffic management. If somebody is in planning and they might want to implement a new public transit route, it might be a tram route or a zero emissions bus route. They can do that knowing that they've got a baseline to work from, and we can start to see the improvements of how we are implementing those projects to mitigate carbon from those particular areas of the city. So hopefully that's given you a good insight into what we're doing at Everimpact with Dijon. And at the end of the session today, we'd be very glad to take any questions that you might have. So with that, I'll stop sharing and hand back. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Pete. Great. And it worked live, so it's almost like a nervy moment.
And it worked live, yeah, live demo. Talk about taking a risk, eh?
Yeah,
no, that was good.
No, it's good. It's good. I think following that, can I ask Aurélie to sort of join the floor? It is yours now.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Okay. Is that fine?
Yes, we can see your slides. Thank you.
Okay. Well, hi everyone. The same. Very glad to be with you today to share some feedbacks from how satellite data, satellite remote sensing is used for the assessment of several sets of coastal issues, and for sure all these kind of issues you may have around your cities when you're coastal located, I would say, is having very much importance for dealing with the environment. And of course, with urban planning in a context where climate change is really strengthening our coastal areas and coastal cities. So today I've prepared some slides about some of the applications we've been doing in IC. IC is a French company which is based in the south of France, in Bordeaux. And typically our background is about coastal and biodiversity monitoring from space. And we had the chance now a couple of years ago, 5 years ago, to be awarded a contract from the European Space Agency. You will see that typically all that the city and coastal cities now, the ones that are using operationally satellite data for their monitoring, assessment, and operational planning has been, I would say, encouraged by some of our space agencies and European Commission. And typically, this is a case for coastal erosion. You can see on the map that since 2019, the European Space Agencies has been focusing on coastal erosion, having a big program concerning more widely than these 5-6 countries, European countries that you see on the map: France, Germany, Norway, Portugal, Greece. Hi, Georgia. Georgia was one of the partner of the program, and Romania. And typically there are 3-4 other countries, including Spain, United Kingdom, Italy, that were also covered during the program that is now finishing. And there, of course, it's showing how threatens are the coastal areas and our coastal cities along Europe or along the world, I would say, with some of these catastrophic pictures right after storms that we may have seen in Europe these last 10 years. And on the back, you have, on the bottom, you have pictures from South America in or French overseas coastal areas in French Guiana. And of course, all around the world, we are having this kind of coastal change, coastal retreat that is really of big concern, so that our coastal cities have to manage coastal erosion risk and marine flooding all together for preparing, adapting, and getting our coastal cities more resilient with regards to climate change. So there you have some examples of, so typically, sorry for that, some of the slides are stated in French. The kind of metrics and analytics you can have about shoreline change and also beach change and bathymetry change. You will see on the next picture that there are a wealth of shoreline and beach indicators and metrics that are needed to assess this issue of coastal erosion and shoreline planning. So typically taking benefit of satellite data, the one from the European program Copernicus, and other kind of satellite data from commercial sensors and providers. There you can have a very nice time series over 20, 30, or 40 years time span of how the shoreline is retreating in each of our countries and each of our coastal cities. And also, you may know also for coastal issues and coastal dynamic issues that there are very much, I would say, a set of indicators about beach and shoreline that needs to be monitored. And typically, depending on the environmental and marine context and conditions, these kinds of information about how the seabed is moving and how coastal sediments is moving over our coastal areas and shorelines is of crucial importance for managing the sediment stocks along the beaches, which is directly linked to shoreline dynamics and shoreline planning. So typically these pictures are showing how space data can be used to produce this kind of information about the underwater bathymetry. This is the mirror of land topography. And this is of crucial importance to have these sediment budgets over the beaches and over the shores along our coastlines. So maybe to be a bit more concrete with some of the work we've been doing in France for coastal cities. Here, typically, we are along the French Riviera in the Bay of Nice. And like many other places around France, you may know that in Europe, in France, there's about 20–25% of the total shoreline that is retreating and getting backwards, landwards. So this is really a global issue to deal with. And like in Nice, there you can have a look at the airport, nearest airport that has been built on the sea some 10 years ago. But typically this city of Nice is having strong issues about sediment budget and trying to maintain the sand and the gravels on the beach so that they can still use the beach and have a beach capacity for tourism. Nice and I would say the regional province of Alpes-Maritimes, le département des Alpes-Maritimes, along with the support of the Région Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur and of course of our customer SMIAG, which have the competence about coastal risk in Alpes-Maritimes. All these guys have entered in a more operational studies to have a better assessment of how intense is the coastal erosion hazard, and also prototyping decision support system that will better account with how the seabed is changing and the bathymetry change, because you may know that Mediterranean Sea has very low tidal range. That is, much of the beach changes and shoreline changes are very directly linked to what is the behavior of the beach and the water, thus the bathymetry information. So this is one of the very practical case studies in the south of France, showing how this kind of satellite data are feeding coastal monitoring systems and thus providing information for decision support for beach and shoreline planning. Another eye on what is occurring on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean in French Guiana. There, the same type of data, the one from the Copernicus program, Sentinel-1 and 2, feeding the same kind of coastal monitoring systems. This one is focused on how mudbanks are moving, drifting along the coast. Typically, there you have a 500 kilometers long areas from the entrance of the Amazon River up to the Orinoco on the northwestern part of the picture. And there are very huge amounts of mud coming from the rivers. These muds are forming in huge sandbanks, which are directly linked to coastal change and shoreline change. You see on the picture on the left side, this is a beach very close to Cayenne, a bit downdrift of the city of Cayenne, which is over there, and typically we are there. And there's a very strong dynamics at the time scale of 5-10 years, where sometimes the beach is very sandy and very protected because there are huge banks protecting the shorelines in front of the beach and the area. But 5-10 years after, the banks has moved on the westward, and finally there's no much more these natural protections to the beaches, and then the area is very much more exposed to coastal erosion hazards. So the same in French Guiana, that this kind of monitoring systems, which is feeding really the Coastal Observatory Organization, Observatoire de la Dynamique Côtière in Guyane. And they've been using now for many, many years, but very operationally since the last 5 years, satellite data to feed knowledge and get a kind of monthly updating and annual updating of the coastal erosion hazards, which is helping them, all the cities around the areas to move forward their coastal planning issues. I was taking the opportunity also to introduce also how useful, precise and detailed land cover information are necessary to assess these coastal risk and prepare for coastal adaptation and an increasing of coastal resilience for our cities. There now we are in South Brittany, in the south in France, around the city of Lorient. Lorient has been using satellite data quite recently. They were searching for tools and fresh data to provide many informations about their land cover, biodiversity assets in the city, but more widely in the district. Typically, what has been done is working at a scale of 1,000 square kilometers around the city of Lorient, around Pays of Lorient. With this kind of information now in their hands, they have a realistic portrait of land covers and biodiversity assets in the city and around in the county. And finally, when you cross all these kind of informations, when you're crossing coastal erosion index, from what we have seen just before, to these environmental stakes and urban stakes that are far or importance, or the vulnerability of the shoreline and the coastal cities are. Finally, at the end, you have this kind of information that is shown. It can be graphically shown, as typically Pete has previously shown. You can move around the map and in the platform and see at, I would say, 115-meter resolution and at 10-meter resolution the same, how vulnerable and how exposed the shoreline and the coastal cities to coastal erosion. So this is made by crossing the several kinds of information, coastal hazards, together with the land cover and the stakes around the territory.
Aurélie, just 1 more minute.
Yeah. Well, well, so finally, just to focus finally, and it was also time to thank the people, of course, of our community. All these kind of data are coming from Europe and the Copernicus program, but also from a French program called Terra Spatium, that is providing French public stakeholders with free, very high resolution satellite data that are really needed for some of our of these coastal issues, assessment, monitoring, and decision support systems. And of course, this is also time to thank our agencies, the French space agencies, the European space agencies, which has providing support all these years about prototyping, making demonstration of the benefits of satellite data for this kind of issues. And of course, a mini clin d'œil, I would say, I'm also putting a bit of light on the initiative in which IC is part of, that is the Space Climate League. This is a starting initiative that is held by Aerospace Valley in the south of France, which aims at building a kind of alliance of service providers dealing with satellite data for climate issues. And typically, I'm hopeful for this opportunity to introduce Kate to all of you, but it could be, I hope, of future interest to have other partners from our small Space Climate League to share other examples of what they are doing with regard to climate change and climate adaptation in Europe. So thanks for all of this. Yeah.
Thanks much, Aurélie. A quite different perspective to Pete, but you can see the power of satellite technologies already at work, covering different use cases. So thanks. Yes, can I now ask, if possible, our last speaker, Georgia, to come live and share what's happening in some of your precious historic sites.
Good afternoon, everyone. I believe that you can see my presentation right now.
Yes, all good.
Okay, so before to begin, I would like to thank you for giving us this opportunity to present our solutions and to have the chance and discuss with all those participants from different countries and different perspectives. Our company is Terra Spatium. It is a Greek SME with more than 30 years of experience in the domain of remote sensing. And if it's possible, I will close my video because I don't have a stable connection. In any case, if something goes wrong, just let me know. Huh? So, yes? Yeah. Okay, so today the presentation will be on the cultural heritage sites and urban sites. Most of our examples will be on Greek monuments, and it will be about a tool that is non-invasive, is completely from space in order to assess vulnerability and structural health of the monuments. So we do understand that cultural heritage sites as well as urban sites is really important for everybody, for the society, and that we need to protect and conserve them from various natural hazards. So we propose a very efficient method that is completely remote from space that can provide accurate measurements for land displacements over a big period of time. We begin with the Acropolis case study. It was a project that started in 2018 and finished on 2023. We included in our study the complete Acropolis complex, which is not only Parthenon, it's Erection, it is the Temple of Athena Nike, it's the Propylaea, as well as the wall. There are a lot of monuments, smaller ones that are not so famous, let's say, besides the Parthenon. And while on the same area, there are also open monuments, not like the big ones that we already know. So we work really close with the Acropolis Restoration Service, which is an organization under the Ministry of Culture, and they are responsible for restoring works on the monument. They already have some, let's say, in situ tools in order for them to be able to monitor specific situations that may happen on the monument itself, like the ones you can see on the slide. For example, they do have an in situ measurement system with optic fibers and so on. But for them, it was really important to have also a complementary methods like the ones that we provided from space. So it was also crucial for them not only to be able in monitoring the structural health of the monuments via the time, but also to be able and to see the results come from their restoration works that are going for many, many decades in Acropolis. Those pictures that you can see are actually from inside the Parthenon, where there is a big construction place that's replacing and constructing new parts and filling the missing ones. So in our study, we covered a big time scale, multi-temporal time scale from 1992 to 2020. So we used past and present satellite observations from different SAR missions. We worked with synthetic aperture radar data sets for a big span of time, starting from ERS-1 to Envisat to Terra Spatium and to Sentinel-1. So we did use a big group of data sets come from different missions, the open one, but also the commercial one. Also, it was really important to monitor the situation that have been during the really two big earthquakes that took place in Athens in 1999 and in 2019. And to be able and to see if those earthquakes have taken their toll on the monument. So we used a method of persistent scatterers interferometry method, where we identify stable points, let's say, throughout all those years, starting from 1992 to 2020. The deformations are calculated in millimeters. It's really impressive to be able and see such measurements with an accuracy of millimeters from space observations. We used in total 274 Sentinel-1 images, and we have identified many different scatterers. On the next slide, you can see that I've focused right now on just 3 of them. For each scatterer, we have a graph, which in the one axis we have the date, and the other axis we have the deformation rate in millimeters. So we can see the movement of each point through time. Here you can have an overall, let's say, idea about the scatterers that at the end of the day we identified on all those monuments. And as a conclusion to this study was the fact that we don't have big movements on the monuments. Some red dots that you can see on the screen are parts that were removed and then put back on the monument after they've been restored. So after all, we've witnessed that the monument is really stable throughout the past 25 years. And following the case study of Acropolis, we have the Heraklion Walls case study. Heraklion is a big Greek city in Crete Island, and they have a really extensive walls that are running through the city that you can see on my screen. So it's Venetian walls. They are dating from the 16th century, and they were part of the fortification at that period. But nowadays that the city has grown bigger, it's just a part of the urban structure. For this project, we worked along with the Ephorate of Antiquities of Heraklion that are responsible for monitoring and managing this extensive monument. But the specificity in this case, rather than Acropolis, is the fact that the walls are part of the city, and on the bastions of the walls are many critical infrastructures like schools or infrastructures that are dedicated to art, like for example, we can see here a theater, or also for sports and leisures. So the Ephorate also has witnessed fractures and cracks on the wall, but they weren't sure about how the monument was evolving through time and the sizes of those, let's say, fractures. Meantime, a big also restoration works are taking place on the Heraklion walls. So for them, it was really important to see the actual results of our study. In this case, we also worked with Sentinel-1 imagery, 175 different images, and we collected several different scatterers. In this case, also, we were able to identify hotspots and areas that needed to be more investigated. What you can also see on this slide is the fact that we work for the total urban area of Heraklion city, not only the walls, since the images are having a big scene. So next is the case of Athens coastal zone along Phaleron Bay, where we started a study it's not yet finalized. So you can see on the slide the Faro area that's located along the coastal zone of Athens. In this specific area, there used to be an industrial site in Tavros, where during the past there were some industries that used water in order to support their activities. Due to the usage of this water, ground subsidence was monitored over specific areas. It was an overexploitation of the aquifers, since a lot of water has been drained there, and that caused a movement on the land that took its toll on the buildings, as you can see on the slides. So our study, in which, by the way, we not only have remote sensing engineers, but we have geologists, hydrologists, civil engineers, and geotechnical engineers. We have seen that from 1997 to 2015, there has been a big difference in the piezometric line of the area, which means that the situation is returning back to its normal. While we have measured a lot of scatterers over the areas 2002 to 2010, where we have seen also big deformations. What we are planning, the benefits of our tools that we propose is the fact that we cover a large scale, for example, a complete region. Our tools are non-invasive, they work from space, so they're independent of what's going on right now on the actual monument or on the urban area. We are able to provide past-present monitoring, retrospective, for example, as well as we have a team with many different researchers, not only remote sensing engineers, but also geotechnical and civil engineers that are also have specific knowledge on the structural health of the critical infrastructure, for example. So our next steps is to be able to complete our study over the area of the Athens Riviera. So, which is a really dense urban area with 3 big rivers running there, Kifissos, Ilissos, and Prodafni, with a lot of critical infrastructure, right, for example, roads and boulevards. And of course, the big construction works that are taking place right now, the Ellinikon project. So thank you so much for your attention. I am at your disposal for questions. I will be happy to answer.
Thanks, Georgia. Valentine. Very, very good. Brilliant. Now I think we are now close to our panel conversation. I think we've got quite a few questions in the chat box, but just before that, I just wanted to briefly sort of like remind you of our upcoming webinars as well. So obviously we have a few more coming in the next few months. Next month will be focused around mobility and urban planning, and then there will be also a webinar on green space management. So please tune in then. The programs will be made available on our website with detailed speakers. And also we are planning to host a workshop for different cities. Obviously our project SPACE4Cities has also is working on challenges that we would like to use for our procurement, and we are kind of very keen to validate those challenges and use cases with other cities. So you're invited to or welcome to join in as well. It will be in Rotterdam Okay, so now enough talk about the project. Let's sort of switch to the panel. Brilliant. Okay, thanks so much. So before we open the floor to everyone, I just wanted to very briefly, like, maybe ask a few of the presenters a few questions, if this is okay. So Pete, starting with you. So who would be the user of your tool, right? And obviously, give me an example, for instance, in Dijon, who was using the tool, and actually, what are the tangible benefits they were able then to obtain from it?
So that's a really good question. So it's a variety of people. So we don't limit the number of people that can use the platform. It could be, you know, the director of sustainability and that person's team. It could be folk in traffic planning, housing planning, a variety of departments within the city that are able to gain access and make decisions based on real data. So historically, a city would make assumptions based on you know, historical approaches to emissions calculations. So they would either do a bottom up or they would do a top down approach. So you know, typically those departments would go to the sustainability team and say, are you able to make these calculations for us? And they would either do a bottom up calculation, you know, using you know, sort of balance emissions. So the equivalent, they would work out an equivalent per capita across the city. There will be some freight emissions calculations. There will be some energy inclusions in there. And that transparency on that inventory is challenging for them to do that. And they're generally massively underestimating the amount of emissions. The other alternative historically has been a top-down approach. So they would, you know, go to that director of sustainability and they would say, you know, we need this data. So they would use high-end predictions based on per capita, and those numbers would likely have scope 2 emissions included, and the numbers will be far higher. What we're able to do is give them an accurate number, which is, it's not quite in the middle, but it's, you know, it's less than the top-down approach. It's an accurate figure, and that means that data can then be shared out to anybody who has a vested interest in planning for the city. But typically, sustainability team, building planning, or transport management would be the key roles within a city that would need that data.
Thank you, Pete. Yeah, Aurélie, the next one up. Yes, so obviously, again, the question: who specifically is the user of the data or the tool that you sort of, or the insights that you deliver? And more importantly, I always ask my question: what do you do then once you know the erosion, right? So what are the actions that actually those people would do to maybe prevent erosion or whatever happening?
Yeah. Well, these are mainly public stakeholders. So you may know that in many of our countries, there are coastal observatories that are trying to build up since, I would say, 10 years. And depending the level of maturity, these data are feeding this kind of coastal observatories. Typically in France, there could be several levels of public stakeholders. It could be coastal cities, for sure. This is, well, I would say the first and direct level. But there could be coastal observatories that have data mutualization and so on, and all the stuff is occurring then at the department or regional level. And I guess France and other countries are trying to reach, I would say, the more upper level and national level. But this is still early time, and this kind of national initiative, and in some of our countries, there are national coastal planning, coastal shoreline and coastal planning strategies, and this is the case in France. So it's a bit early, but in a couple of years, we can hopefully think that typically the French Ministry for Environment or some of its operational agencies, like the National Institute for Geography, IGN, would be one of these guys being in charge of refreshing shoreline data, beach data, and so on for the benefits of everyone. But it's not still not yet the case now.
But okay, I understand a bit more about sort of like this sort of, user scope and policy influence. But what can you actually do? Can you come in and bring a truck full of sand and refill it, or build up new sea defenses, or what can you do now with this data, knowing that there is coastal erosion happening?
Mm-hmm. Oh, you're putting a finger and a full hand with the subject of building coastal defenses, Alex. Because I guess
example, just so
I
it's
guess
more tangible.
time is not much at building strong, hard defenses over the sea, but much more to adaptation and coastal resilience. Mm-hmm. So, but for sure, all these phenomena and coastal issues are occurring over different space and temporal scales. So, of course, when the stakes, when the coastal area, coastal city has strong stakes over its waterfront, the first reflex is to strengthen the walls and so on. So, to preserve the existing assets, built assets, but now times is to have a better understanding and acknowledgement of the coastal processes, of how exact and precise is the coastal erosion processes over your coastal cities, so you can plan on the long time about how your city, your coastal city will move, will adapt, and maybe move landward, and maybe keep some assets, urban assets, and move them backwards so that they are not much more exposed to this kind of coastal risk.
Okay,
so,
thank you.
But for now, you need the knowledge, of what is occurring over your coastal area,
Yeah, cool. And then, Georgia, a question to you as well. Obviously, I mean, it's impressive to see like movements of millimeters from space. So this is one of the takeaways. But again, the question for me is like, maybe not in the first example, I guess, but maybe in the last example. What were the actions then? So what could you then do, or what? I mean, if you can see there are sort of shifts in sort of like your geology or whatever, like, what are the actions then the city can do?
Yeah, that is a really nice question, because actually there are actions to be taken on behalf of the local municipalities, or for example, from the region itself, for providing better structural measures to be able and to provide, let's say, fortification over areas that there is subsidence, or for example, in public infrastructure, like for example, buildings, to be able and to provide some structural works that can help and defend those works. Another part of the study is the fact that the water that's coming from the rivers of the area, if it doesn't flow through the area, and because all the roads are from materials that are not letting the water running down below the surface, then the area may be falling. So it could be a case to study the rivers and the water flows, and how this is managed over an area. So it's not only a structural matter, but it has many different aspects. We cannot hear you.
Alex, you're muted.
I know worries. We had a few questions in the chat box. Maybe Renske, do you want to read a few, and we can take it from there?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can. There were some for Pete. So Pete, can you tell a little bit more about what kind of satellite data are you using, and how does it kind of relate to the CO2 sensors? How many sensors do you have on the ground? What's the share compared to the satellite data and the type of satellite data? Can you say
Sure.
a bit?
Okay. So I'll start with the sensors. So we've got 75 sensors dotted around at strategic locations across the city. They're self-contained units, normally attached to existing street furniture like road signs or traffic lights. And we would map out a city, determine the exact or optimal locations for those sensors, and then those are installed. It's about a 10-minute job to install that sensor. As far as the satellite is concerned, we're currently using Copernicus data, and what we're doing is we're aggregating the sensor data and the satellite data in combination to determine geolocation, weather patterns, and the effects on carbon drift across the city. And then, we will take those calculations and then be able to work back to exactly where that carbon was emitted from, what the source was from that.
Thank you. And there was also a question that how do you then compare to previous yearly estimates of Dijon? And also if the data
so
we're
so that's a really good question. I think I started to cover that in my previous answer, but historically Dijon are no different to most other cities around the world. They were using existing inventories, and those were based on either a bottom-up approach or a top-down approach. The bottom-up one generally was the most inaccurate. I think for the previous year. I'll give an example of what I showed on the demonstration there. Our figure was 1.98 million tons of CO2 for the plotted area. The previous year, using a bottom-up approach, Dijon were calculating that as 0.8 million tons of CO2 using that bottom-up approach, and using the top-down approach, which also included things like likely scope 2 inclusions. They were calculating that using their inventories at 2.3 million tons. So we were lower than the top-down estimates, much higher than their bottom-up estimates. But what they can do now is they can accurately determine exactly how much CO2 is being emitted across the city, because it's real data. It's not estimates and old inventories. So there is a significant difference in the way that the results are presented compared to the traditional ways of doing that.
Thank you. I would have Alex also a question for Aurélie. Is there time?
Yeah, sure. There's time. Yeah, please go for it.
Aurélie, you mentioned at some point that this French satellite data, I think, was also very needed, or at least additional data, let's say. So what is it that you cannot do with the Copernicus data that you said that you use? It's not sufficient. So what is it lacking? What kind of other data sources are essential?
Yeah. In fact, Copernicus data, they are precious, but for sure, for some topics, very high resolution data, like the one from Airbus. I'm thinking about Pléiades, or its counterpart, American counterpart, Worldview, and so on. These data, by their very fine resolution, they provide a better description of several topics of the environments. And typically for the stuff about biodiversity mapping, for biodiversity managers, when they need this precise assessment of the kind of vegetation and the kind of habitats, ecological habitats, ecosystems over their areas of interest, you cannot achieve this very fine resolution and assessment of vegetation with only 10-meter resolution data. But it can be done with this 1 meter's resolution data and using time series additionally. So, and this is almost the case for coastal erosion, same issue. We've found some, I would say, some magic in using the Copernicus data at 10 meters to assess processes that are more in the range of meter accuracy, like shoreline change. And it does work well, but of course, when you want better accuracy, about your measurements and metrics about coastal change and shoreline change. Here again, very high resolution metric data are very useful, and it provides much added value to this kind of analytics about coastal erosion. So once again, there are places for both Copernicus data, but also for very high resolution, more commercial satellite data.
Thank you. Alex,
Okay.
back to you.
Yeah, I think we can still, if we have a few more minutes, so if there's anyone in the audience who has a pressing question, so feel free to sort of like raise your hand or switch on your camera and ask. Anyone? No? Good. Yeah, so I think, I really enjoyed the session, I have to say. I've learned quite a lot more about what is possible and feasible now with satellite data. Obviously, both like provided by, let's say, EU, but also more commercial things. So it's also good to learn. I hope this sort of also whetted your appetite as well. To those who joined the call, to also to learn more about it, what's possible, what's feasible. I think the webinars are really there to sort of start the thinking process about, is this something that I could leverage as well for my organization, my city? And yeah, I hope that you equally enjoyed the session, and will tune in our upcoming webinars again. Okay, so thanks again, Georgia, Aurélie, and Pete, for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you
sharing the insights.
Pleasure, thank you.
Yeah, then I wish you a nice day and a good rest of the week. Okay, thanks so much.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.